Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Edge Concept. In this tutorial, I'll be doing this simple animation using React.js and Frame of Motion animation library. In case you're new to this channel, my name is Aluku Godric. Welcome back. This is the application without the animation. You can see when I toggle in between the list view and the grid view, there is that sudden transition. There's no smooth transition. So I'll right away take you through the folder structure of my project. I am using Visual Studio Code Editor. So I'll start with the public folder. Inside here I have the images folder, which contains all these images for my project. And then inside the SRC I have created one main folder for my components. Then inside the components folder I have several folders. The first one is the animation folder, and this is where I have the file in which I'm going to describe all the animations. Then I have data folder. Inside here I have data.js. Basically I have an array of objects here, and this is the representation of the information of these cards that you're seeing in my project, either in list view or grid view. Then I have a grid folder. Inside here I have grid.js and a grid.css. This is responsible for displaying this grid view, or is responsible for this grid view. Then I have a list folder. Inside here I have list.js and list.css, which is responsible for this list view. Then I have a navbar. Inside this navbar folder I have navbar.js and navbar.css, which is responsible for displaying this top navigation bar that you're seeing in both my views. That is it for the folder structure. I'll take you through my app.js, which is my main component, uppermost component, not the uppermost, but the one that is housing my two views, that is the list and the grid view. I have done conditional rendering here based on this list state, which is false. So when this is active, I'll be displaying the list, and when this is false, I'll be displaying the grid. So I have done props drilling so that I'll be able to perform this state change in my navigation bar. So I'll take you to my navbar.js. Inside here I have this logo, which is the watches you're seeing there. It's just a text. Then I also have two icons. You can see when I toggle there is that change in icons, and these icons are from React icons library. So if you're going to clone this project from GitHub, when you run npm install, you'll be able to install the Frame of Motion library and the React icons library. So far for this project, you can see I have React icons version 4.31 and the Frame of Motion version 6.24. So that is it for the folder structure. I'll start implementing the animations. So I'll open my animation.js and start describing my variables and constants here. So the first thing I'll want to do is to describe the transition, which is going to describe the duration and the delay of the animation in between this list and the grid view. So I'm going to describe the transition that is going to apply to both the list and the grid. So I'll create a constant here and name it card transition. Of course, I'm going to export it. This is going to be an object. What I want to describe here is only the duration. I'm going to set the duration to 1 second. And then I'll be using animate shared layout, which is the component in FramerMotion that is going to help us perform the cross-fading of this grid and list view. Of course, what is being cross-fed here is the cards, these cards here, because they're changing their positions. So when you visit the FramerMotion official website and you search for this animate shared layout, it's a component that enables you to perform layout animations. So it's across a set of components that don't otherwise share a state. They don't share a state, but this component have a common layout ID. So when you look at my app.js, I've done a conditional rendering here, which means that one of these is rendered at a time, or one of these is brought into the tree or mounted into the tree at a specific or at a time. So what happens is that these two components contain the cards. So the list view contains the cards and the grid view also contains the cards. And what I want to implement here is that to make sure that these cards have a common layout ID. Now, to be able to have this cross-fading, I have to wrap these components with the animate shared layout. So I'm going to do that. Of course, I have to import it from FramerMotion library. So I'm going to cut this and paste it inside here. I have a ES7 extension which allows me to import this automatically whenever I render it in my components. So it has been imported from FramerMotion. So the next thing I'm going to do is to move into my components. So I'll start with the list. Now inside my list.js, the card is represented by this class name here, which is a list card. So first I have to prefix motion, which is the basic component for FramerMotion, and I have to import that from FramerMotion. So I'm going to do that. So after prefixing that, I have to import it. That. And then I have to introduce a common layout ID. So when you look at my components, they are all importing data from data.js, which is the array of these objects. I have iterated over the array using the map method, and I'll be able to access the information of each object in the array. And because this is the same array that is being used in the grid.js, one of the common variables or data here is the name of the images. So to be able to access the name of my image, I'll be using this argument, which is the watch. So it is going to be watch dot the name of the image, which is just image. Maybe let me take you back to data.js. So the name of the image is represented by image, just like that. Then the next thing that I'm going to do, sorry for that, is to perform the same code in this grid.js. So I have to import motion from Framemotion. Then my card is this one here, this div, a grid card. So I have to prefix motion here. Then I have to introduce a common ID or a layout ID, which is going to be my object represented by watch. Dot the image name, which is represented by image, like that. So let's test out if this is working. So I'll navigate back to my application. Let me refresh it like that. So when I toggle, you can see the animation is starting to take place. So the next thing that I'm going to do is to fix these images and the text. What I want is to hide the images when the toggling starts, and show them later after the crossfading has taken place. So I'll be going back to my animation.js and create another constant that is going to describe that animation. I'm going to call it I'll call it a card animation. Of course, I'm going to export it. This is supposed to be a constant. So I'll be describing the initial animation and the initial state of the animation and the animate state. I'll be using variants. So I'll give those two states different names. For my initial animation, I'll give it a name of hidden. This is going to be an object. So I'm going to describe the Y position of my cards. I'll set it to 25 pixels. Then I'll also describe the opacity. Initially, I want my cards to have an opacity of 0. Then I'll also describe the scale. So I'll set the scale to 0. Then I'll move to describing my animate state. I'll call it show. This is also going to be an object. Then I'll start with the Y position. It's going to be 1, not 1 but 0. Then I want the opacity to move from 0 to 1. Then I'll describe the scale. I want the scale also to move from 0 to 1. So I'm going to import this in my list and the grid components. So let me start with the list. Let me just copy this and paste it here. It's from animation. that. Now what I want to affect is the image and the text, so I'm going to prefix motion components here. And then I'll also introduce my variants. So the variant is going to be card animation. And then I'll describe the initial state of the animation. So the initial state, I had named it hidden. Then I'll also describe the animate state, which I named show. Let me save this. So I'm going to copy the same information and paste it in the specific components in the grid component. So first I have to import the variant here. And then for the image, I need to copy all this and paste it there. I also have to paste it for the text, which is my paragraph. Then I have to prefix motion component in my components. So let me save this and check if this cross-fading is smooth. So the next thing that I'm going to do is to describe the transition so that I'll be able to set that delay and also set the duration of these animations of these images and text. So I'm going back to my animation.js and describe that transition. I'm going to call it image text transition. Of course, I have to export this. It is an object. So what I want to describe here is the delay, which I'm going to set to 0.6 seconds because I have pre-tested this. Then I'll also set the duration. I'm going to set the duration to 0.7 seconds, like that. Then I'm going to import this in my grid and list components. So let me import it here. And then I need to describe the transition. So my transition is going to be this image text transition. I'm going to do the same for my grid component. Sorry about that. I have to import it here. So let me test my application. Yeah. So these animations are working out, but they seem to be happening very fast. I had described the transitions for my cards, and I need to import those transitions so that the transition will be able to control the speed of the animation for the crossfading. So that is the first thing I did describe in my animation.js, this card transition. So what I'm going to do is to import this in both my components, that is the list and the grid. So it's card transitions. I'm going to prefix that in my cards. And my card is this one here. For the list, let me save that. Then head to grid and do the same. I also have to import it here. So let me save this, then head back to my application and see what is happening. So you can see the transition is very smooth and the speed is controlled, and I think everything is working as intended. Thank you for your time. Thank you for spending your time to watch this video. I hope it's going to help you somewhere in one of your projects, or it has inspired you to use FrameMotion in any of your React.js projects. Thank you very much for your time. See you next time.